Welcome to your Daily Dose of Sunday School, episode 109. We're on chapter 4 of R.C. Sproul's Reason to Believe, Christianity is a Crutch for Weak People. So, Sproul is going to demonstrate that we don't really have a psychological human need for the God of the Bible. In fact, we very much, even Christians, have a psychological need to deny who he is. I remember going to this church when earlier in my life, which was the preaching was not very biblical, and the preacher would go around to different passages, which is okay, but I always felt like he never got to any hard topics, and I'd made this game of whenever he preached a passage to look like in the rest of that chapter and find some difficult thing that I knew he would never tackle and that he would always avoid. And I was always able to find something. So, even Christians have a hard time psychologically dealing with the God of the Bible. So the idea that we just came up with him for our own comfort doesn't make any sense. And Sproul gives 5 areas in which we don't want to deal with the true God. So first, there is a threat of holiness from God. God is so much other than us that the reaction in the Bible is fear. So Mark 4, we have the account of Jesus calming the storm. And of course, the disciples are scared for their life. Mark 4:39, and he awoke and rebuked the wind and the sea and said to the sea, "Peace, be still." And the wind ceased, and there was a great calm. And he said to them, "Why are you so afraid? Have you no faith?" So they're scared of this impersonal force. Just like Freud said. He said Freud said that humans made up this idea of God in order to help them deal with the psychological fear of impersonal forces of nature. And here, the disciples have this terror at the wind and the waves. And Jesus points that out. Why are you afraid? But then, listen to this next verse. And they were filled with great fear. So there's something that has them even more afraid. And said to one another, "Who then is this that even the wind and sea obey him?" So there's even greater fear for this God who is so different than us. We also have a threat of omniscience. We all have things that we hide from each other. We try to put our best face forward. And Luke 5:8, this is where Jesus has done a miracle in front of Peter. And here's Peter's reaction. It says, when Simon Peter saw it, he fell down at Jesus' feet, or at Jesus' knees, saying, "Depart from me, for I'm a sinful man, O Lord." So he immediately, so omniscience, that means God knows everything. And he realizes that this is someone whose sins are not, that can see all his sins, that they're not hidden to this one who can work miracles. And it's terrifying. There's also a threat of sovereignty. We all have a sense of guilt, and there's a great psychological desire to not have anyone who can call our actions bad, So many things are motivated, so many people's decisions are motivated by the desire not to have anyone be able to invalidate their decisions as wrong. There's also the threat of omnipotence. God, this all-powerful God. Not just a higher power, but this is all power. Daniel 4:35, all the inhabitants of the earth are accounted as nothing, and he does according to his will among the host of heaven and among the inhabitants of the earth, and none can stay his hand or say to him, "What have you done?" So God has all power, and it's terrifying to think about a being with whom there is no way around him. There is no higher power that you can appeal to. It's just absolute power, and what he wants to do is going to happen. And I've felt the psychological distress of that when, things in my life have been taken from me, and I'm not like that. And just the knowledge of, okay, I can ask him for whatever kindness, but ultimately he's going to do what he wants to do. And that can be very troubling. There's a final threat, the threat of immutability. And immutability means that God doesn't change. And so there's no hope that tomorrow he'll be less holy, or that he'll make a mistake and his law will change. He is ultimately, because of all these things, we have to conform to him, and we would like to conform him to us. Even Christians do this. Christians water down the nature of God because psychologically it's hard to deal with who the God of the Bible is. So ultimately the point being that human feelings, however you feel about the existence of God, yes, I just listed kind of how psychologically unpleasant these aspects of God can be, but then he is also kind and loving and patient. He helps those who wait on him. So yes, there's a psychological need for him, but there's also psychological distress. So which do you pick? The way people feel about God does not invalidate him, does not make him, none of that is evidence for whether he exists or doesn't exist. And so that whole argument of why people came up with knowledge of God is really just silly. It doesn't prove anything.